Hello, good morning and welcome to Breakfast with Roger Johnson and Sally Nugent.
Our headlines today: as the UK's coronavirus death toll rises above 28,000, the Prime Minister talks candidly about his experience of being in intensive care with the virus.
In an interview with The Sun on Sunday, Boris Johnson says he was given litres and litres of oxygen and it was 50-50 whether he'd be put on a ventilator.
Business leaders urge the government to be bold in supporting the economy as it considers when and how to ease the lockdown.
He's so sweet. Oh, congratulations.
A royal welcome, the Duchess of Cambridge shows her support for new parents and maternity staff with a virtual visit.
Good morning. Grounds for concern. Brighton voiced their opposition to the Premier League finishing at neutral venues. Clubs have been told it's the only way of restarting and completing the remaining fixtures for safety reasons.
Good morning. We're waking up to a lot more cloud across England and Wales today. There's a lot of fine weather out there at the moment, but for some of us, the chance of some sharper showers heading on into this afternoon. I'll be taking a look at what your chances are in just a little while.
Good morning, it's Sunday the 3rd of May. Our top story on Breakfast this morning as the number of people in the UK who have died from coronavirus rises above 28,000, the second worst total in Europe. The Prime Minister's spoken for the first time in detail about his experience of being in intensive care.
Speaking to The Sun on Sunday, he said contingency plans were made while he was seriously ill in hospital. John McManus reports.
Coronavirus continues to take its toll on families across the UK. The country now has the second highest death toll in Europe, behind Italy. 28,131 people have now succumbed to the virus, and thousands more were left severely ill, including the Prime Minister. In an interview with The Sun on Sunday, Boris Johnson said doctors had to administer litres and litres of oxygen, and at one point he wondered, how am I going to get out of this? He said the bad moment came when it was 50-50 whether they were going to have to put a tube down my windpipe. In the end, Mr Johnson didn't reach the stage where he needed to use a ventilator.
Good morning.
Now back at work, one of the biggest issues he faces is how to leave the lockdown. A review is due on Thursday. At the start of the restrictions, 1.8 million people in England were told to shield themselves as they were considered most at risk. They included those being treated for some forms of cancer or with diseases such as asthma and cystic fibrosis.
We understand could cut.
At Saturday's Downing Street briefing, the government indicated that those restrictions could be reviewed as more evidence emerged.
We do recognise that asking somebody to stay shielded for their own health protection for a very long period of time, and it may be several months, is quite a difficult thing for them to do.
And regarding the next most vulnerable group of people, such as pregnant women in the over 70s who've been following stringent social distancing measures, doctors, including the Royal College of GPs, say that age shouldn't be the only factor in deciding who continues to self-isolate when the lockdown is eased. And they've warned that the mental health of those staying at home should be considered. Many European countries are now coming out of their lockdowns. The challenge for the government is to formulate a successful road plan for Britain. John McManus, BBC News.
Well, let's get more on this now from our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake. And Jonathan, this interview that Boris Johnson has given does give us a little bit of insight into what actually was going on when he was in hospital.
It certainly does. It's an arresting account of the Prime Minister's suffering from coronavirus. He talks at first about being reluctant to go to hospital when he was in isolation in the flat above Downing Street, but was forced to go by doctors. And he says that looking back, they were right to do that. He describes getting fantastic care and it being awe-inspiring to see the medical teams at work. As for the nights he spent in intensive care, well, you heard the 50-50 moment described in that report there. He's talked before about things could have things that could have gone either way, and he describes that being a tough old moment. I won't deny it, he says, and that people were starting to think about how to handle it presentationally. And I think that is an indication that the Prime Minister himself and those around him were at that point fearing the worst. But he says he thought that he never actually thought he would die. Some terrible buoyancy, as he put it, inside of him kept convincing him that everything would almost certainly be all right in the end. A lot of people have asked how this whole experience might have changed the Prime Minister. It's bound to have had a profound impact on him, and he says that he is now driven by a desire to stop other people suffering, but also by an overwhelming desire to get the country back on its feet. And it is an insight into the first-hand experience the Prime Minister has now, as so many tens of thousands of other people have, of the potential impact of coronavirus.
Jonathan, thank you.
Now, some countries around the world are relaxing restrictions by reopening restaurants, cafes and markets from today. An hour ago we were in Germany. We've also heard from Spain. Let's head now to our Southeast Asia correspondent, Jonathan Head. He's live for us in Thailand this morning. And Jonathan, what's the situation there, please?
Well, still pretty quiet. This is a very limited easing of the lockdown. The numbers here in Thailand and in all of Southeast Asia have remained incredibly low. There have been good government measures, but people think there may be other factors like weather. We've only got 3,000 cases, just over 50 deaths, only 176 people still in hospital. So you would think the government could now really relax things. People here don't have social security or savings. They're reckoning 10 million jobs could be lost by the end of the year. The collapse of tourism has really hit people hard. And this lockdown for the last 6 weeks has shut down all restaurants, all nighttime places. Basically, the only thing that's really been open is food shops and a few street stalls. From today, parks are open. They've been shut, which has been a big blow. Sports venues, some of them, markets, that'll be very important for poorer people. It's a gradual opening up. Nighttime entertainment won't come back. There is also in the restaurants, they're saying you can open, but you've got to have big social distancing, even plastic screens between people sitting at the same table. So it's a very cautious opening up. The government is very happy they've got their coronavirus numbers down so low, only a handful of cases in the last few days each day. But they don't have very extensive testing facilities here, so they are very, very cautious about allowing coronavirus to take off again. So there will be more life on the streets behind me, but there will not be a full easing of the lockdown for many weeks yet. They're going to do this in tranches. We won't see things like department stores fully open until much later in the month.
Jonathan, thank you. Jonathan Head there live for us in Thailand this morning.
The Duchess of Cambridge has made a virtual bedside visit to some new parents during a special video call to midwives. The Duchess worked on a placement with the team at Kingston Hospital's maternity unit in southwest London last year as part of her campaign to raise awareness of the importance of the early years. She took the time to talk to new parents, Rebecca and John.
Well, firstly, huge congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Is it a little boy or a little girl?
It's a little boy.
Little boy. He's so sweet. Oh, congratulations. And when did you have him?
Last night at 10 p.m. So.
Oh my goodness. You must be exhausted.
Yeah, pretty tired now, yeah.
What an amazing thing to do a few hours after you've given birth. Yeah.
I know, your head's spinning, you've got a newborn baby, and then all of a sudden there's the Duchess of Cambridge to have a natter.
And then you're on telly. Never mind.
There you go. It is 9 minutes past 7 now. Good morning. There are fears that patients who have COVID-19 are developing kidney problems as a result.
New figures from a research charity suggest more than 2,000 patients admitted to intensive care with coronavirus needed specialist renal treatment following kidney failure. Angus Crawford reports.
Meet Maurice Marshall, before COVID, singer and student. And now, survivor.
I was terrified, petrified. Well, as I got into the ambulance, looked at the house, I thought, say goodbye to the house, you're not coming back. Because I just felt I was struggling to breathe.
He spent 22 days on a ventilator. The virus attacked his lungs and then moved on through the body.
So my kidneys failed several times. So what people do fail to realise is that with COVID, it's not just about COVID pneumonia. You know, you get a bit of a heavy-duty flu or you have problems breathing. It does go for other internal organs.
So when you perform CRT...
The latest figures show more than 20% of those in intensive care suffer kidney failure. Many need specialist treatment, some with this kind of machine, delivering what's called renal replacement therapy.
The virus can be seen within the very fine structures of the kidneys, and it also affects the stickiness of the blood. The blood, it becomes very sludgy, and because the kidneys are full of little blood vessels, it sludges up in the kidneys, and therefore the kidneys start to fail.
Leading to a worldwide surge in demand for machines, tubes, filters and fluids. This German factory has increased production, but there's a warning of severe disruption to supply in the UK. British doctors are having to use new techniques to conserve equipment. Some patients are now sharing machines.
The volume of kidney failure has reached the point that neither myself nor my colleagues have ever seen such a great surge in the incidence of acute kidney injury, and that is certainly putting stress on the system.
But a word of reassurance too. These machines are only used in intensive care, not for the 30,000 or so people who need regular dialysis in the community. That service shouldn't be affected. Maurice in better times. Now, bit by bit, rebuilding his health, thankful to friends, family and medical staff, but also sounding a warning.
This thing, it's vicious, it's non-discerning, it will go for anyone. We really do have to focus and not get lax about it, because that's when things will get worse again.
Angus Crawford, BBC News.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.